Heat check. Basketball, basketball, college. Basketball, basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa.
Welcome into another episode of the Heat Check Hangout, your number one source for all things basketball, college. I'm your host, Brian Ralph. Joined as always, my co-host, Connor Hope. Riley Davis will be along shortly. First time the three of us have been together doing a hangout in a while, and it's nice to hang, let me tell you. And it's nice to have actual games to talk about too. It's so nice. The season is started. I am wearing my old James Madison sweatshirt I had buried deep in the closet. And we'll get to a number of different topics on this episode, but I do think it's fair to start with James Madison because they have been, Connor, the team of the week on opening night, going into East Lansing and beating the top 5 Michigan State team on the road in overtime, controlling really most of that game, following that up with easily the most entertaining game of the first week of the season, and we may look back and it would be the most entertaining game of the entire season on Thursday night in their double overtime win over Kent State, in which they erased a 5-point deficit with 3.8 seconds left, because that can happen. But this JMU team, to me, has been the major lightning rod, because they had the upset, and now it's become a standpoint of, are they this year's FAU? Are they legitimately good? Are they a team of destiny? All that kind of stuff. And we're recording this on Friday, November 10th, and we still have 4 or 5 months left in the season. We're already crowning a team of destiny, but this James Madison team, to me, is a legitimately good team, and one that is a team that's going to be worth monitoring and be a factor throughout the rest of the season.
Oh, absolutely. I think when you're looking at this JMU team, you see a team that, they didn't blow out these games, which is fine. They were both on the road. They were both overtime wins. So you could be like, oh, well, it could have gone either way, which is absolutely true. Also, I think you have to give credit where credit is due. They probably shouldn't have won either of these games. We're talking about a Michigan State team that they held to, what was the 3-point shooting for Michigan State in that game?
1 of 20.
And this was a team that was
5%.
third in the country. And Michigan State followed it up with another poor shooting performance. But this is a team that shot over 40% through Big Ten play and was third in the country on the season in 3-point percentage. I think what this says about JMU, maybe not this year's FAU, we don't know that. FAU last year was top 10, top 15 in all the metrics, raw metrics, heading into the tournament. But I think when we look at this JMU team, we look at a team that should be there in the tournament. They are they are looking like the team that you point to as saying, this is why we need more mid-majors getting at large bids, because if they don't win their conference tournament, there's no guarantee they get in, even with these 2 wins. I also think my biggest takeaway is that is it too much of a stretch? I know it's early in the season, but is it too much of a stretch to say that if JMU does what we think they can do, which is be this year's FAU, based on what we have seen, is it a stretch to say that we need to put Terrence Edwards on All-American watch lists now?
No, not at all. Not at all. He's averaging, I wrote about this in the Ralph report that's up on heatcheckcub.com. There are other guys who have made, the big shots and played big roles for JMU, but through these 2 games, again, in which they've beaten a preseason top 5 team and the MAC favorites on the road, he's averaging 24.5 points a game, 7.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, doing everything really for this team and being the guy. The fact that they're able to compete with these teams and beat them, particularly Michigan State, was because they had a reliable go-to guy in the offensive end who could do what you needed and could create. A lot of teams around the country don't have that. We've talked all off season and going back to last year too about how guard play across the country is down. Edwards is not just one of the better guards in the Sun Belt, but one of the better guards, I think, in the country, one of the more all-around guards in the country, and that's a huge, huge boost for this JMU team.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I'm still high on Michigan State. Kent State still looked good. So we might get to the end of the season and all of a sudden this Michigan State win doesn't look as good. The Kent State win might not look as good, but like as they stand right now, James Madison has the best resume in the country.
We're only a couple weeks or a couple days into the season, right? So having a win over a top 5 team on the road and upset, it's automatically going to give you the best resume. Not only adding the Kent State win on top of that, but when you are a mid-major in JMU's place, like these are the games you have to win if you're going to be in any at-large conversation at all. Now I'm recalling off memory here, but I looked at JMU's KenPom page for the rest of the season and doing that Ralph report. They don't play another KenPom top 100 team the rest of the season, or at least a team that's currently in the KenPom top 100. So, like, these are the games you have to have. You have limited opportunities when you are a mid-major to have those real resume boosting wins that matter overall and not just on the mid-major level, right? They'll have to hold serve and Sunbelt play, obviously, because you can't fall short there. But these are games you had to have, and they went out and got them. Again, you could have easily lost both games given how close they were, but they were the better team against Michigan State. They deserved to win that game. You could argue they stole one against Kent State, and that's fine. They could be sitting at 0-2, and you wouldn't really have any real concern for what their goals were this season, which were to win the Sun Belt. They're the preseason favorite to win the Sun Belt, preseason pick to win the Sun Belt. You could be 0-2 and still have that ahead of you and not feel any worse about where you were at there. But the fact they're 2-0 now resets expectations a little bit, and they have to deal with people patting them on the back now and telling them how great they are. But that comes with the territory.
Will you be ranking them?
Yes.
Because I think that's a legitimate conversation you have to have. And here's where I'm a little bit iffy, right? Because you mentioned they could easily be 2-0, right? A loss in overtime or a loss in double overtime doesn't change the way I feel about how good they are.
Mm-hmm.
But they did win those 2 games. I'm probably ranking them as well. I guess my flip side question for this is, because we're ranking them, maybe we can move on to Michigan State's issues because they're glaring.
Yes.
How far do we drop Michigan State? Because to me, it's like, I trust their shooting, so maybe not that far. But they also did lose this game. But had they won this game, would we drop them?
Yeah, this is one of those things that I think is going to require more context that we will get in the coming weeks as they play more games, right? Because right now, through 4 or 5 games, I thought JMU was going to be a legitimately good team this season. As Riley Davis joins us now, as we're talking JMU Michigan State, I thought JMU was going to be a legitimately good team this year. I did not think they would be this good. I thought that they had the potential to challenge Michigan State, not necessarily win. So the fact that they did, I am putting more of the result on JMU being really good. So I'm going to rank them, and I'm not going to dock Michigan State as much right now because of that. However, if JMU starts losing and or Michigan State starts losing, I think that's where you see kind of that exponential fall from there on, because then you have another data point of, okay, yeah, you really weren't this good of a team as we thought, right? It's the it takes a couple times to break your biases and reaffirm something new. So I'll probably keep Michigan State in the top 10. JMU will be in the 20-25 range for me somewhere.
Who would have predicted that Ralph would be ranking JMU a week and a half into the season?
I might have.
I didn't realize you had the JMU for the
I have the
missed.
JMU sweatshirt on. I had JMU for the almanac, so I was high on this team last year, and I'm high on them again this year. I had them
Real
as
ones
my top Cinderella and our heat check staff picks. But
Riley, you missed it. Not only are we talking about ranking JMU, but we also put Terrence Edwards squarely in the All-American conversation after the first 2 games.
Y'all need to take a breather.
If they keep this up. If they keep this up, because the conversation
We're not a Sunbelt podcast.
not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Maybe that's
the conversation. The conversation was, if people are calling JMU this season's FAU, and it's way too early to dub that. But if they continue that, like with what he's done, Terrence Edwards is going to continue playing, has to continue playing at that level. And if that's the case, he is in the All-American conversation. It's we're having this conversation 4 months too early, but that would be the outcome.
I won't fight you on that. It's just I don't think it's like even that Wofford team with Fletcher McGee that ended up getting a 7 seed and gave Kentucky all it could handle in the tournament.
Mhm.
Like, that's one of the best mid-major teams I can think of. And even that team wasn't on the same level as FAU as far as like how dominant it was throughout the course of the season, how it was a top 25 Kim Pom team for most of the year. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm sorry, Brian, to crush any dreams about your JMU Dukes. I'm sure you will be. What city is JMU in? Are they in Roanoke?
Harrisonburg, I want to say.
Harrisburg? It's something. It's like a
Harrisonburg.
random city like that. I'm sure you will be welcomed with open arms in Harrisonburg anytime. But I just
Damn
feel
right.
like having an FAU type season is so rare. But you know what?
Yes.
If that's your dream right now, who am I to put a damper on it?
Well, and the funny thing is that
not my
we're
dream.
talking about JMU. We're talking about JMU. They're still, if we don't count Gonzaga or San Diego State, they're still squarely the third best mid-major, with the mid-major player that's probably the third most likely mid-major player to make an All-American team. Behind Janelle Davis and Aiden Mahaney.
Yep.
Because Aiden Mahaney looked damn good against New Mexico.
He was incredible. He was incredible in that game. And if he plays that way, I know we talked on the West Coast preview podcast about it being kind of silly, not silly, but we both still really thought Gonzaga had the edge over St. Mary's. He plays like that all season long, and that edge isn't there. That edge is in St. Mary's favor. But let's go back to Michigan State. Let's go back to the Michigan State side of things, because Riley, how far are you dropping them? Because they had the JMU loss, have shot the ball poorly, incredibly poorly through 2 games now, like unsustainably poorly through 2 games. But there are also, as Connor said, there are legitimate flaws with this team that are fairly obvious. So how do you stack up Michigan State moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question because I've had them as my national title pick really since like May or June, and I don't want to give that up yet. I still think 2 games is way too small of a sample size to back down on that. But yeah, I'll probably move them down to the 9 to 10 range, kind of like you were saying, Ralph. And it's not just the JMU game. Like, there were stretches of that Southern Indiana game that were disheartening to see. Like, Southern Indiana is a second-year D1 program. They play in the OVC, like one of the worst leagues in the country since that mass exodus of teams. And even they were able to manufacture a 12-0 run and hold Michigan State to, again, one three-pointer made. I thought it was really nice to see that after that 12-0 run, as soon as Izzo put Xavier Booker in and Cohen Carr in and got the vets out, they went on a nice little run, got it together a little bit. Xavier Booker had some really nice splash plays there. Talking to Carter Elliott about it on the Sleepers Media podcast, I know he's covering the Spartans pretty closely for their rival site. You know, he was noting how there were some possessions where Booker just straight up looked lost defensively against Southern Indiana, and that is worrisome to me. Because I think ultimately for this team to hit its ceiling, its front court rotation has to be some combination of Cohen Carr, Xavier Booker, and Carson Cooper, with like Malik Hall closer to 10 minutes or less. Probably same for Mady Sissoko. Like, you don't want him. I don't think the best version of Michigan State has Mady Sissoko logging double-digit minutes. So you got to let those dudes get some reps. But at least with Xavier Booker, I know there's the insanely high ceiling, but he just might not get there this year. It's concerning that he's still struggling defensively against a team ranked 330th on Kim Pom in Southern Indiana.
Well,
yeah,
Connor,
the shooting isn't
the
shooting isn't an issue to me. The issue to me is, and I get JMU's a bigger mid-major team, getting out-rebounded by JMU and only out-rebounding Southern Indiana by 3. And Tyson Walker is who we thought he would be.
Yes.
Michigan State is not going to be good if Walker needs to score 25 points per game for them to have a shot at winning.
Yeah.
But right now he has to, because he is the only player they can rely upon in longer spurts to put that offensive output out there. Like, Cohen Carr's looked great in shorter stints, but outside of Tyson Walker, like, you're looking at this team going, where is the offense going to come from?
Mm-hmm.
If he's off the floor, it doesn't.
That's the alarming part for me. And they'll figure out a workable rotation and pecking order from the offensive standpoint. But when you're talking about them, as Riley said, winning a national championship, making a Final Four, like those are the expectations this team had. So we're going to talk about them in that sense. You need 2 or 3 legitimate scoring options that can get you a bucket. And right now they have one that can kind of get you a bucket. Tyson Walker can do everything that you want to do, but nobody else qualifies for we can kind of get you a bucket when you need it sometimes. Nobody else is there. Fears may end up getting there. Cohen Carr may end up getting there. I do have faith, Rally, in Booker developing as the season goes along, but Connor has a long-standing theory and thing he's noticed, trend where it takes freshman big men a while to adjust to the college game, largely because of the defensive intricacies. They can't just out length and out athletic everybody else, because now they're going up against other guys who look like them who are their size. Like that's a transition that a lot of them have to make and struggle with. So you're going to see a lot of Sissoko. And to your point, it's not necessarily the best thing for Michigan State.
Yeah, my counter to that would just be it's not like Sissoko is lighting it up on defense.
Right.
It's not like he's here's some rim protector with good mobility and gives you switchability. I don't know. I know Izzo's in that old school Roy Williams type of ilk of trust your vets, lean on your vets. And in this case, I get it, to some extent, because, they made the second weekend last year. They beat a 2 seed. You want to hope that those guys are good enough to perform in the biggest moment of the season. They earn a little bit of trust, but gosh, it just seems like offensively the trade-off is worth it, because Booker is such a cerebral player who just moves well without the ball, who gets open, who has good hands. I don't know. I hope he can figure it out, because this combination they have of vets, I'm not worried about Jaden Akins either. I think his shot will start to fall. He's had good looks. He has good athleticism. Hogard, maybe you got to worry about Izzo being able to keep him happy, especially if Jeremy Fears gets more and more minutes.
Yes.
Because he has been a little bit erratic throughout his career. But I was so enticed by this blend of vets they had, mainly that trifecta on the wing, on the perimeter, with the newcomers, that even though if it wasn't the most talented roster in the country, I don't even know if it's one of the 3 or 4 most talented rosters in the country. I would say Duke, probably Kansas, despite some shaky fits, probably Kentucky, maybe Tennessee, probably UConn, all have more talent. But the coaching edge that it seemed like Izzo would give, sort of being rejuvenated the past year and a half, I was like, that's enough for me. That's enough for me to buy into this team as a national title contender. But yeah, if he won't develop these freshmen, and if they don't hit their potential, they're going to be in some trouble. They're probably going to end up back on the bubble.
Well, here's the flip side to this, is that Michigan State teams under Izzo traditionally get so much better as the season goes on, to where he has them peaking at the right time. And I expect that to be the same with this group. There are extra factors. Mentioned Hoggard staying happy and some of the chemistry issues with the freshmen perhaps being more talented than some of the guys who are used to playing heavy minutes and don't want to give it up, that have to be massaged. There's also a chance that JMU is legitimately good, and that's not a terrible loss. You just had an awful shooting start to the season, right? Because JMU didn't shoot great in that game either. I think they were below 40% from the field and were slightly better from 3, but weren't good themselves. It's okay. You might chalk it up as a loss to a pretty good team, and we just shot poorly. It was one of those nights. Again, more context will be provided as the season comes along, but it certainly doesn't look smooth for Michigan State, which is the surprising part given the vets that were returning and the continuity that they had. The other, I think, big game of the week was the Auburn Baylor game. Baylor came back and won. Was another very, very exciting, very intriguing game. Connor, Baylor came through. The freshman really stood out in that game. Jacoby Walter being the main one there, looked incredible. Has that made you reevaluate what you think of Baylor going into the season, Connor? And maybe the flip side of any Auburn reactions as well?
No, I mean, I think that was a game Baylor should have won. And I think Auburn came out better. I think to me it makes me take a second look at Auburn more than it does like reaffirm, because I had Baylor, I think, in the high teens, low 20s, somewhere in that range. I probably still have them there. I think a lot of their comeback had to do with like they have the better coach. And that's not a knock on Bruce Pearl at all. But like Scott Drew is at minimum a top 10 coach in the country. And so you have to give them the edge in that space. And, you come out with some freshmen who might be a little bit shaky. Like they have to adjust. And they did adjust mid game in the first game. Like I liked what I saw from Baylor. I don't think I would push them up any higher. I don't think I would drop them because they struggled early. I just think that look, this is a Baylor team that just like Michigan State, just like a Duke, just like Kentucky, it might take them a little bit to get to where we think they're going to get to. But they have talent, they have depth. Jacoby Walter looked good. Ray J. Dennis looked really good, very efficient in that game. So I just, long story short, I think we just have to make sure that we start to look at some of these deeper teams in the SEC, because it wasn't just Auburn, but some of these deeper teams in the SEC put on some pretty good performances, even if they lost, that I think we need to pay attention to.
Riley, did it change anything for you with Baylor? Because I know I personally had some questions about Baylor that I think I feel more comfortable with after what I saw the freshmen at least put forward.
Yeah, for Baylor, it definitely changed some things. With Auburn, it didn't. I said again on the Sleepers podcast, my bold predictions, I wish I would have registered this when we submitted our stat predictions, because I think Auburn's going to win the SEC. I said this like a week ago.
Okay.
And for our heat check stat prediction, I submitted Kentucky. That was when I was under the belief that Big Z, Zvonimir Ivicic, would play this year. And that's still very much up in the air. But it just seems like a lot of stuff is coming together nicely for this Auburn squad, where you have probably the best front court in the SEC between Janai Broome and Jalen Williams. There were stretches of that game where Janai Broome looked like one of the 20 best players in the sport. I thought he sort of faded down the stretch, but he hit those 2 threes in a row and was cooking them. I thought Aiden Holloway looked exactly like what we hoped he would, like a Sharif Cooper, Jared Harper type of Auburn guard. Like that dude looked awesome. I love that they had Trey Donaldson can give you double-digit minutes off the bench as like a big-bodied guard who theoretically could be like a defensive stopper. And Katie Johnson played less than 20 minutes a game in a really competitive game with Baylor. Sorry, that sounds bad. I didn't mean it that way. That's not a knock on KD.
I think Katie Johnson's minutes. It was great.
I think that's the perfect role for him, though, is to give him that 15 to 20 minutes where he can just like be an insane like spark plug, whatever you want to call it, off the bench and not be relied on in crunch time. Like, I really like this Auburn team.
The David Jenkins at Purdue role that I loved so much last year.
I kind of feel like a higher end version of that. Like Katie Johnson can heat up and maybe, I mean, he's won Auburn games before, which I don't think you can discount. But yeah, the real takeaways for me was that Baylor is going to be a top 25 team. I had them outside of my top 25 to start the year because I thought it was going to be too much Ray J. Dennis for my liking. Walter was incredible. Like I should have known. Baylor has a track record. Scott Drew has a track record of just getting freshman guards, even if they aren't like top 5 kids, they make them look that way. Keontae George last year. I thought Yves Missy looked incredible. That like he swung that comeback with his defense and his athleticism. Jaden Nunn, I don't know what his final stat line was, but it felt like he made a difference defensively and he can hit some threes. Like, I think Baylor's going to be a much bigger factor in the Big 12 than I initially thought.
Those two things, Missy and Walter, for me, were huge because my questions with Baylor were the front court, right? Because that was a bit of a question mark depth wise, and who their go-to guy would be offensively, because you had to replace so much from last season, and there were guys who you were hoping could step in. But it was more, we need to see something from them we haven't seen before in their long college careers other than Walter. And you're always kind of iffy with any freshman immediately coming in and being the guy. However, Walter is the guy and looked like he could handle that load more than effortlessly. His ability to score from all three levels, off the bounce, catch and shoot, on the move, it was exactly what you wanted to see. Missy, I think, adds that depth in the front court as the athleticism that Everyday John doesn't have really anymore, or is still working his way back to after the injury he suffered. I think they are probably going to be in that mix to threaten Kansas in the Big 12 race, right there with Houston potentially as the biggest threat. Auburn, I love the young guards were incredible. Like, if Auburn's able to bring all of them back, I'm going to be so high on Auburn next year. And I think they'll be very good this year. I came out of that thinking that they were top 25 level good and top 5, top 6 in the SEC good, given how good the top of the SEC is. But I was incredibly impressed with Baylor. They answered the questions that I had. And again, we need to see if it's consistent, but they answered the questions that I had, and I think Walter is an All-American candidate. Is there anything else that went on this week? Because I know there were some games that ended up being good, some we thought we were looking forward to that kind of fell off. Was there anything else that happened this week? Connor, I'll open the floor with you that really stood out to you, whether it be Michigan dominating UNC Asheville, sorry, Riley, in a way that was, I think, unlike what we were expecting, or a team like UNC, sorry again, Riley, somewhat struggling with Radford, or what jumped out to you?
I think any questions I had, and there weren't many, but I think any questions that you could have possibly had about Purdue were answered in that game against Samford. That starting five with Kaufman Wren and Lance Jones, like that is a scary starting five.
Yes.
Jones was so quick in that game, and granted, it's against Stanford, right? You're not expecting the top level athlete, but he looked so quick whenever he had the ball. And I mean, Zach Edey dominated like always. Only played 20 minutes, still led the game in scoring and rebounding. Kaufman Wren basically contributed everywhere: 3 assists, 5 rebounds, a steal, a block. But I mean, this team, the guards look better. Lawyer and Smith combined 8 of 11 from 3. Obviously, I talked about Lance Jones. He isn't going to be asked to score a ton. He only scored 6 points, but we know from his previous stops that he can put the ball in the bucket. Like, I'm teetering on the edge of moving Purdue up right now to number 1 because they looked so good.
Okay.
And I was worried that we wouldn't get, like, if Smith and Lawyer struggled, which was a real possibility, like, okay, no, you'd keep them at 2 or 3. But because they looked so well oiled from start to finish in that game, like, I just, right now, if they were to play a tournament right now, I would pick Purdue to win.
I still need to see them get pressed by a team that can actually pressure them. They
did get pressed, and they broke it like 50% of the time, which is a lot better than they did last year.
That's an improvement. That is an improvement.
50% increase.
When they use Kaufman Wren as the press breaker, they kind of like put him about 3/4 up the backcourt, tossed it to him, and then he would toss it out to like Lance Jones or Foster Lawyer or someone. Like, that worked. It was when they gave it to Braden Smith, like right on the end line, he would drive himself into a corner and stop, and then they'd have to call a timeout. Like, that's what they did last year. That's not going to work. But using Kaufman Wren as the press breaker worked for them, and I think that's what they need to start working on, because they know they're going to get pressed. But if they can rely on him or like a Gillis or a First to be a press breaker, I think that helps them a lot.
Riley, what was your big takeaway from the week, from the other action?
Yeah, I'll address my two Big South teams now that you teed me up. A little almanac talk with both UNC Asheville and Radford. You want me to start with UNC or Michigan? Or UNC Asheville or Radford?
Wherever you would like. Take us wherever you would like.
All right, I'll go ahead and hit on the heels. So I still I don't blame anybody who ranks UNC in the top 25. Kim Palm has him in there. Evan Mia has him there. Torvik has him there. Personally, for me, for my personal rankings, and you could say there's some fandom slightly factored into this. Sorry, it's hard to completely separate it. I wasn't ranking them going into the year because I just wanted to see it. I wanted to see this core, mainly of Armando Bacot and RJ Davis. Granted, their legacy is secure in Chapel Hill. They made a Final Four, got to a national title game. But I just want to see, I want to see this core be able to sustain a good season for a whole year, So that was sort of where I was going in. I want to see them prove it. So I have them just outside the top 25. However, even after that Radford game, my concern level is at a 3, maybe. And this would tie into an almanac team of mine that I'm pretty high on. Radford has legit guards. They have DeQuan Smith, who was on that Murray State team that won 30 games a couple years ago. They have Brian Antoine, who's a former McDonald's All-American. Both those guys are really good coming off of screens. Radford runs a ton of floppy action and off-ball stuff to get them open shots. They can both go ISO and get a bucket. Kenyon Giles is their little 5'11" point guard who torched Notre Dame last year and had big moments against high major teams. So they have legit guards. It's not and guards with pedigree too, not just annoying mid-major guards. I think Darius Nichols is a really good coach. Assuming Radford, if they can win the Big South, either tournament or regular season this year, I bet he at least gets an interview with West Virginia because he played there under Beeline. I'm not saying he's going to get the job, but he's a good coach. And UNC tinkered with a ton of lineups. It felt very Roy Williams-ish with some of the guys that Hubert was trotting out there. Only Cormac Ryan exceeded 30 minutes a game. He played 31. And if you've followed Hubert Davis's track record of rotations at UNC, that's a big deal where he's routinely played 5 guys 35 plus minutes. So he was messing around with lineups. Defense was a bit concerning, which we knew going into the year. They had some bad communication on ball screen coverages. There were times where you could tell Harrison Ingram thought they were icing, Cormac thought they were switching, which led to some more open shots for Radford. Radford also hit some contested shots. So my concern level is still pretty low. Just want to see it proven over a longer stretch before I'm ready to be yep, heels are going to be top 25 all season. On the flip side of that, Michigan, I thought looked incredible, and I'm about ready to say they're going to be a top 25 team this year. And that's because that offense looked amazing. Doug McDaniel was dishing the ball, hitting shots. Kamwa looked like Duke game Kamwa, and it just seems like he's empowered and ready to rock for them. And I admit, again, some fandom goggles here. I just love Kamwa because he packed up Filipowski and Duke last year, but his athleticism is game changing. I thought Namari Burnett looked good in his role. Terrace Reed didn't have a great game, but still can fill a role as a defensive presence in the front court. And again, it can't be overstated that they put up 99 points on an Asheville squad that led the Big South in defensive efficiency last year, and it wasn't even close. They were far and away the best defense in their league last year. And the way that Michigan dismantled them reminded me very much of what UCLA did to them in the tournament, where it was they were just too much. And with UCLA being a top 10 team last year when they were healthy, I don't think it's far-fetched at all to suggest that Michigan, I don't think they have a top 15, top 10 ceiling, but it's pretty reasonable to say they could stay in that 20 to 25 range for most of the year.
Yeah, that performance made me, I think, reevaluate where we're at with Michigan, because they have 2 top-end guys now. And I think that was a big question coming in the season was, all right, where's the top-end talent? This looks like a team of role players. Right. Where's the top-end talent? And they have that. And the role players played their roles, as you said, to perfection. At Asheville, they should have beaten Asheville. But Asheville is a good team that could have and really should have challenged them. And that was never a question. They never came close to threatening or making Michigan do something Michigan did not want to do. That's made me kind of, to your point, reevaluate. Michigan is not a team that's going to finish 11th in the Big Ten like they were picked in the preseason. This is a top 25 caliber team if they keep playing at this level. We touched on it briefly as we were going through everything, Connor, with Aiden Mahaney and St. Mary's. But their performance against New Mexico, which was a dominant win, coupled with the Steele Venters injury for Gonzaga. Venters is out for the season, reigning Big Sky Player of the Year, who transferred to Gonzaga. Him being out for the year, has that made you reevaluate that race between St. Mary's and Gonzaga at the top of the WCC at all?
Not really. I had it tied, and whoever had the highest, and I thought Gonzaga would probably have the highest KenPom rating, which is I think what they use for net rating, which is I think what they use for the tiebreaker. If it's not a head-to-head, right? So I think they split. I think Gonzaga wins at home. I think St. Mary's wins at home, and then they both get the 1-2 seed. I still think that's the case. I think you're more likely to see St. Mary's as the 1 seed now, because I think their offense showed that it could be really good. Obviously, their defense is one of the best in the country. I'm more worried about Gonzaga's offense than I am their defense now, because they don't have that locked-in, guaranteed three-point shooter on the perimeter. We expect Hickman off the ball to be better. Ryan Demhard's not a bad three-point shooter. We expect Dusty Stromer to come in and be pretty solid, but like those are all kind of expectations where Steele Venters was a known quantity from deep, and you don't have that anymore. Defense, though, on the perimeter without Steele Venters should get better. You were kind of making the sacrifice offense for defense whenever he was on the floor. So I would probably, if I had St. Mary's, I think 19 and Gonzaga 14 heading into the season, I'd probably go like 17-19. St. Mary's at 17, Gonzaga at 19, somewhere in that range. And granted, we haven't seen Gonzaga play, so we don't know what they're going to look like. And they play a pretty decent Yale team. So like if they blow Yale out in that game, like I'm not saying that there are no concerns, but it alleviates some of the concerns that you have without Venters. I do think, however, and unless you guys want to talk about St. Mary's, there is a West Coast team that I am ready to crown as clearly, and Brian and I already thought they were, but I think there's a West Coast team I'm ready to crown as the best team on the West Coast, and I don't know. There's a challenger in USC, but I don't know how, because San Diego State looked so good in that second half, and they were missing their best or second best player.
Yep.
We are not about to hop on Al Gore's internet and let you say that San Diego State is better than USC.
San Diego State is better than USC.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Isaiah Collier is
when we say that, fully acknowledging that USC is a very good team and I think has Final Four potential. San Diego State is the best team on the West Coast.
Yes.
Brian, I feel like Brian is just like, one day when he relocates either Harrisonburg or San Diego, honestly, retiring in San Diego sounds like a pretty good plan. So like,
Tempt me with a good time and see what happens. Tempt me with a good time and see what happens.
If this is part of the long haul, the long con, but like, come on, man. We just saw, again, I think Kansas State's a little bit overrated. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they missed the tournament. Just because like Arthur Kaluma might not be who a lot of people thought he was. But still, they led that game from wire to wire, looked dominant. Like, I just think that backcourt is so good. I can't take anybody on the West Coast unless Arizona goes into Cameron tonight and gets an emphatic dub. I'm rocking with the Trojans, man. I love that backcourt so much. They are so freaking good and dynamic. And
yes, if USC gets its full complement of players back, gets Bronny James, gets Vincent. Yes, thank you. I think it's a conversation at that point, and not from anything negative San Diego State, but I think USC has elite potential. I think Arizona too has elite potential. I'm excited to see them play Duke, and we'll get to that here in a little bit in this weekend slate and what's coming up this next week. But San Diego State just went to a national title game. Brought its core back. There are some questions, but put on a show without their second best player, starting point guard. Like it's there wasn't anything San Diego State did to knock them off their perch.
Because like, what were the concerns about San Diego State? 3-point shooting. Okay, well, Micah Parrish and Reese Waters come in and kind of are like, we're good. I mean, Lamar Butler didn't shoot well from 3, but those two did. Losing their starting center, Jaden Ledee came in and dominated that game. And granted, it's Fullerton, but absolutely from start to finish, dominated that game offensively. Got a double-double, 27 and 11. Still got a block shot, a steal. Looked very dynamic as the starting center. Again, they were out Darian Trammell, but they forced. They got 12 steals. They assisted on a lot of their shots. They put up 83 points. When was the last time you saw it? How many times did they score more than 75 last year? They put
more
up
than
83.
more than you think. I wrote about this actually going into the NCAA tournament, but from like the month of February, or there was a month stretch in February where San Diego State had a top 5 offense in terms of efficiency. Get at me. Come at me.
Okay,
with
but
negative San Diego State takes, Riley.
They led Cal State Fullerton by 1 early in the second half. I know they were up by like 27 late, but like Cal State Fullerton, they're like, one of our group chats was like trolling Eli. Maybe Ralph caught some too, because somehow people on our group chats forget that Ralph is like probably a bigger San Diego State fan than Eli is. But people were like getting ready to bring out the Mountain West slander because Fullerton was giving them a game.
No, but what I'm saying is that like we all admit Michigan State lost to James Madison, and we're maybe dropping them to like 8, 9, 10. And San Diego State started out slow and housed Fullerton in the second half.
Fair. I mean, I like San Diego State. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure they're going to be a top 25 Kim Pom team all year. I'm sure they're going to have like a top 5 defense. I just sometimes I don't know.
13.
I don't want to say. What'd you say?
13 games at least 75 points last season. 13 games. It's not a new thing.
Sometimes you just got to go with what your eyes tell you to. And in this case, I've watched a game of a Isaiah Collier and Boogie Ellis backcourt, and I'm all the way in, and it's going to take a lot to get me off that perch.
I'm all the way in too. Like they were fun. They were awesome. San Diego State's better right now.
You can't forsake your first love of San Diego State. You can't leave them behind.
Two things can be true.
For the NBA guards.
2 things can be true.
USC's 6th best player and Reese Dixon Waters, who's now just Reese Waters, that has you ready to say San Diego State's about to run it back?
I think San Diego State's second weekend team. I think USC has the potential to be a second weekend team as well.
There's a difference too between 6th best and 6th man, because Reese Waters is better than the 6th best player on USC.
I know. I'm exaggerating to make a point.
Well, we've brought up
and Fullerton's a better basketball team than Bakersfield. So
okay, but they're not a better team than Kansas State.
Right. Well, we've talked about the Duke Arizona game enough, so let's go ahead and look ahead to the weekend and the week ahead. I know, Riley, we will both be in Cameron for the Duke Arizona game. I think there's a real chance that next time we have this conversation, Arizona is in that conversation for best teams on the West Coast. I don't think that'll involve a win over Duke, but I think the level of play could be there. Along with that game, we can talk about that game too. But let's dive into that, and then what else you're looking for, looking forward to watching this weekend and early next week.
You want me to go first? You want Connor to take it?
Let's go ahead, Riley, since you'll be there.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Do you want me to hit on Duke Arizona or go other games since we've already talked Duke
Both.
Arizona? All right. Duke Arizona. I said this in my little watchability breakdown. Of course, Caleb Love's going to command the biggest storyline. His return to Cameron. I think the bigger thing to watch though is the front court battle, just because if Mark Mitchell isn't playing, that takes away one body that Duke can throw at Umar Ballo. Like, I don't like if I'm a Duke fan, I would be shuddering at the thought of Ryan Young trying to guard Umar Ballo. Like, if that's the case, they can feed Ballo early and often. But on the contrary to that, Filipowski's going to present matchup issues to darn near every team this year. But if any team can slow him down, I think Kashad Johnson is the sort of defender you want to put on Flip based on his length, his athleticism, his ability to be opportunistic when it comes to steals and blocks, like, and just create some chaos there. So I think that's kind of what decides it. Like, can Kashad Johnson keep Filipowski under 20? And for Duke, do they have anybody who can keep Umar Ballo from getting a double-double and a bunch of easy looks at the rim? Like, is the transition? I think both these teams probably want to get out and run. Should be like a game that gets into the 90s. But yeah, I think it ultimately comes down to the front court. As odd as that might seem in a Caleb Love game where he's liable to go off for 30 or he's liable to go 3 for 15.
Well, we'll see. I think the battle between Love and Tyrese Proctor will be interesting. You can throw Jaden Bradley, Kylan Boswell in that mix as well. But it's going to be a really, really fun game. What else are you looking ahead to? I know we got the Champions Classic on Tuesday, which will be a lot of fun. But this weekend and early next week, what else has caught your attention?
For one, Texas A&M against Ohio State. Those are sort of two teams who are supposed to make the leap this year. I know Ohio State's sort of flown under the radar. Didn't look great against Oakland, but a team I still buy just because I think Bruce Thornton, Roddy Gale, really good backcourt. Jamison Battle, proven wing at that level. And A&M, man, it's time to get over the hump. I know they made the dance last year, didn't win a game. And if you're an Aggie, if you want to see Buzz Williams have a good team all season and not drop these like bad non-conference games. And then even looking ahead to next week, I think it starts on Monday. The Asheville Championship features both Clemson and Maryland, two teams that I've been high on since the offseason. So that's a little like more off the beaten path, I guess. But
it'll be a good measuring stick game for both too, because both have expectations. Maryland wants to prove themselves to be a top 25 team. Clemson does too, but Clemson just more so wants to reestablish themselves as a NCAA tournament team, an NCAA tournament lock, really, and this would be certainly a good way to do that and a feather in their proverbial NCAA tournament resume cap. Connor, next week, looking ahead either next week or over this weekend, what games caught your eye?
So, I mean, Gonzaga, Yale, obviously, for multiple reasons. I think it'll be a good test to see what Gonzaga looks like without Venters. It's the first Gonzaga game of the season. San Diego State has two big ones. They have two games against really good mid-majors. Road game against BYU and a home game against, I think it's a home game against St. Mary's. But the one I'm looking forward to the most, and it's because they kind of struggled in their first game, is what does Cal look like with Jalen Tyson? Because they didn't look very good without him. Gets his deserved waiver. I know we were all, maybe not, high's not the right word, but we were less low on Cal than we have been for the past couple of years.
We were excited about Cal basketball.
Yes. So, so I think that's a big test. And this is another WCC. I mean, WCC's schedule this week is pretty good because you've got the St. Mary's, San Diego State, you've got Gonzaga against Yale. I think Santa Clara plays Stanford, which is one of those games where it's like both teams I feel like they need a win, right? Obviously,
Santa Clara's winning that.
They're absolutely winning that.
How could I say that? Santa Clara's getting that win, and it might be like by 10 points.
But I think the WCC's looked good so far. So like most of their games against good competition are going to be pretty good battles. They have 2 losses. One of them was on that thriller between Pepperdine and UC Davis last night, and the other one was who was it? The Pacific lost to a pretty good Sam Houston team. So, but San Francisco's looked good. Santa Clara's looked good.
Yep.
St. Mary's obviously has looked excellent. So I'm excited for those games coming up this week. Purdue plays, I think, Xavier later next week.
Yep. Purdue plays Xavier. West Lafayette as part of the Gavitt games. There's going to be a lot of good games stemming from that as well. Early next week,
Marquette
Gavitt games.
Who wins that game?
Who's Marquette?
They should.
Marquette plays another top 25 team.
Yeah, I need to look at the Gavitt game schedule, but between the Gavitt games and the Champions Classic, college basketball is all the way back. I know there were some complaints about the games this week and the start of the season. it's fine. Like we had some really, really good games, some really entertaining games that we've talked about. But the schedule earlier next week is a banger. And then leading into Feast Week, like these next couple of weeks are going to be consistent, high level, notable college basketball games at pretty much all hours of the day.
Yeah. Michigan State has a couple of big games. Butler's not as big a test, but I think Michigan State needs to win that game or at least dominate that game. Marquette against Illinois, I think, is another one.
There you go.
That will be
Is
good.
Illinois for real? Marquette obviously comes in with the stigma that they have having Shaka Smart as their head coach, etc. So I think that's another big one.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and we'll see it all play out. We're going to cover it all at heatcheckcb.com. Make sure you follow us all along there as well. That'll do it for this episode of the Heat Check Hangout, number one source for all things basketball college. Thank you all very much for listening or watching. If you're on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, do all those things every podcast tells you to do because it does matter. We greatly appreciate it. My co-host Connor Hope and Riley Davis. I'm Brian Ralph. Talk to you again next time.
Basketball college. Basketball college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa, basketball college. Come on. Basketball college. Whoa. Basketball college.